I'm a walker and a talker, but I don't want to be in the way of you guys seeing. But anyway, I am Jordan Pine. I'm the founder and CEO of Greenlight Operation, and very excited to be here this evening with you all. And so tonight what we're going to do is really talk through a variety of backgrounds and signs of human trafficking, what it looks like. We're going to talk about not just the signs, but how are people being trafficked today? What does that look like? We'll define some of the common terms that you may often hear. I know we've got a variety of age groups in the room tonight, so I hope there's a little bit of something for everybody, from our younger folks, and no offense, some of our older folks that are here tonight. We're going to really work to encapsulate what this issue is and how it touches all of us in society. And so we're really going to walk through signs of trafficking, those definitions. Who are the people that are being trafficked? How is this happening today? Why don't they reach out for help? That's a big question we often get. And then ultimately, though, what are the solutions? How can we prevent human trafficking from taking place? And how can each one of us take a stand to get involved in this? And so we're really going to track through a lot of content tonight, but I love for it to be a conversation. So if at any point something I say does not make sense, please feel free to raise your hand, shout it out, let me know. We can talk about it a little bit more. I do have some pauses worked throughout so that we can have some Q&A time as well. But really want it to be conversational. I think that's where we learn a lot, is when we're working through what is impacting us, maybe here locally, individually, and tracking through some of that. So again, thank you for having me. My name is Jordan, and so with Greenlight Operation, we'll start there on who we are, why I'm even here tonight, and what we're going to do. Actually, I'm going to go ahead a couple of slides. So Greenlight Operation, we were founded in 2018 with the heart to combat human trafficking through educational initiatives and to serve sex-trafficked women through a continuum of restorative care. What does that mean? What we noticed very early on when we launched was that we had big dreams and aspirations. We were like, we are going to work to end human trafficking in central Pennsylvania. But it got a little bit difficult when we realized that people don't know what human trafficking is. And for some, they say, it's not happening here. We're not dealing with it. And the reality is that not only is it happening here, but we're a hotspot for this criminal issue. And so we realized we had to go back to the drawing board and start with that education for the public, because people are not going to get involved with something they do not know exists. And so what we have since done is we've worked to educate the community through seminars like tonight. We have research and blogs and articles that we post online. And we've been working with our community members as well as our leaders at the state, local, and actually now federal level on solutions for human trafficking through things like legislation, approaches law enforcement can take, and getting involved with local task forces in a variety of those solutions. And so that's what a good bit of our education looks like. We've been in a lot of school systems and churches, community groups all over the place. Thank you so much. You just unleashed me, and I'm grateful for it. And so we do education, but we have also always, since the start, had a heart for restorative care. And what does that mean? So Greenlight Operation is working to open a long-term care facility that will serve women who have been sex trafficked. Now I know you guys, especially younger folks, might be like, oh my goodness, what does this mean? This lady sounds a little bit scary. I promise, I'm not gonna freak you out tonight. I might a little bit, but we're gonna really talk through things, so you're not leaving here feeling scared or afraid, but rather you guys will have some solutions and ways to prevent this from happening and have an opportunity to get involved. And so our restoration home, we purchased it over the summer. We've been in the process of renovating this and fundraising to bring on staff that will care for women that have been sex trafficked. And this program is going to be about 18 to 24 months for each woman, 12 months to about 18 months, really depending on each lady and the level of care that she is needing. But the goal is that we are setting each person up to live independently following our program, because what you're going to learn here soon is that something like human trafficking, or what you might know as modern day slavery, really tears apart the humanhood side of a person. And that value that is instilled on them is maybe that dollar sign and how much money they're bringing in for another person. And for the longest time, they believe that they just are not worth it. They've believed that they belong to somebody else, that they don't matter, that they're not seen. And this has been told to them for so many years, some decades. Maybe for others, it hasn't been too long of a time, but that damage has been done. And that takes time to rebuild. It takes time for somebody to feel like they are loved and that they matter, but then also to have the skills to live on their own. And so that's what we're going to be working to do, to restore that personhood, to help them get back on their feet. And that takes time and healing and really professional care. And so we are in the process of renovating the home, like I mentioned. Our goal is to have that open by 2024. We're really excited. We've got a residential program director joining our team at the end of March, who's really going to carry us through and getting this program developed. And we've also completed over 180 hours of in-person training on shelter care and management through the Institute of Shelter Care. So just a little bit of background on who we are and what we've been doing and where we are headed to help guide tonight in understanding the information then too that we are bringing to you. So tonight, I've already mentioned briefly what we're going to talk about. We're going to define trafficking, look at some of the statistics. I know a lot of you guys are like, I was in school all day today, I'm so tired of numbers, I don't want to see it. Hopefully though, this will help you at least understand the full grasp of this issue that we're looking at. We're going to talk about what COVID-19 and how that has impacted human trafficking, as well as how people are recruited in the grooming process. This is one I really, really want to spend some time on in that area. We're going to talk about signs of trafficking, how to report suspected cases, how we can stay safe online. We know that a lot of life has moved online since COVID. And continues to do so. And we're not saying, let's get rid of our technology. We know that's near impossible, but rather, how can we steward the resources that we have, and how can we be wise online so that we are not making ourselves susceptible to human trafficking? And then we're going to talk about what might prevent people from reaching out for help, as well as the solutions. So that's kind of our roadmap, where we are headed. And like I mentioned, if you've got a question on anything, feel free to shout it out. To kick us off, human trafficking. How many of you guys in the room have heard about human trafficking or that term modern-day slavery? Who in the room? Beyond just the promotion maybe for tonight. Have you guys heard about it? Yeah? So most of you have heard about human trafficking. Now on the screen is what is broadly used as the definition of what human trafficking is. So one of three things needs to be present for a case to be classified as human trafficking. And that is force, fraud, or coercion. And what is happening in this instance is someone is experiencing force, fraud, or coercion and being forced into a commercial sex act or forced labor services. And somebody else is profiting off of that human. So because of that terminology and really what it's breaking down into, that's where we get the term modern-day slavery from, because someone is selling another human being. And guys, we think, man, this was eradicated many years ago, but it has changed and it's looking a little bit different nowadays. But the reality is that people are still being exploited, they're still being sold and harmed in this way. And unfortunately, criminals have recognized that unlike drugs and other substances, a human can be used over and over again. And there's value to a human being, but not in the way that many of us think of a value of a person. And so, sadly, there are people that are not looking at it in that healthy light. Something that's important to note, though, and young people, listen up on this one. Anybody under the age of 18 that is involved in what we would consider a commercial sex act. So what is that? It might be a term like prostitution that we hear of. If at any point somebody is asking you for any sex act, whether that be, we might think, and guys, bear with me, if we've got questions, feel free to ask me. We can talk about, any questions afterward as well if you're uncomfortable in this space and diving into it. But it is important for us to understand what we're talking about, not fully sugarcoat it, or I'm going to do you guys a little bit of a disservice. So you guys, you willing to go with me here? Yeah? Okay. Thank you. So, with trafficking and minors, if somebody is asking you for any type of sex act, this could be oral sex, this could be intercourse, this could be nude photos, and it could be videos of yourself undressed. And they're asking for this, and they're saying that they are going to give you makeup, a ticket to a dance, clothing, maybe money or gift cards. That right there is considered human trafficking if you're under the age of 18. That's what we would consider a commercial sex act, because there is the exchange of goods. There's a currency being exchanged for a sexual favor. And our law does not look at anybody under the age of 18 as having consent to say, yes, I'm willing to do that. And that's not to take your rights away. It's a matter of protecting you, because for a very long time, our young people were being exploited in this way. And so because of that, you have rights, and there are ways for you then to really seek justice in this situation. And so I want to note that, because what it can also mean is that a peer or a classmate, maybe a parent or a teacher can also be doing this to you. And I know it can be shocking to think, wow, a fellow student can do this to me? And the answer is yes. Greenlight Operation has actually been involved in knowing of cases where 8th graders were trafficking one another. And they were doing this through friend group initiation, where they were saying, hey, you know what, to be part of our friend group, you have to send nude photos to, so-and-so. You've got to send them nude photos. And if you do that, you can go to the dance with this upperclassman. And that was the case there. They were doing it through tickets to a dance and things like that. There have been other cases we've worked on and been a part of where it was makeup that was getting exchanged, or sneakers, or clothing. And it was happening in middle school, it was happening in high school. So that means that this can be happening student to student, right? It could be an adult doing it to a student, it could be a student doing it to a student. Things to keep in mind, all right? So those are our definitions that we're working off of. When I say human trafficking, this is what I'm referring to. So what does it look like here globally? We're going to go global, national, and then we're going to really hone in here on the local level. So we saw a recent jump in the number of cases that are estimated worldwide. It went from 40.3 million victims to 49.6 million victims worldwide. And of those victims, less than 1% are ever rescued. And we get that from the Department of State as well as the International Labor Organization. There's a lot of people, and less than 1% are getting rescued. Why? That is the big question we often get. Why are 99.5% or 4%, can't quite remember if it's 0.6 that are rescued or 0.5, but 99%. Why are 99% remaining in captivity? Why are 99% being exploited and not getting help? And a lot of that has to do with overall lack of awareness. A lot of it has to do with victims not recognizing that they're a victim of human trafficking. It has to do with limited resources in communities and understanding what it is, but then also the aftercare side of it. And all of that really culminates so that we are struggling then to see more and more people getting rescued. But as awareness grows and as more services come forward, we are seeing change, and we are seeing these we are seeing more getting rescued. So I'm curious to see in a couple of years how these numbers might change, and hopefully we're seeing that more people are rescued than remaining in captivity. We talked about the money side of things. Sadly, there is money in human trafficking. Criminals recognize this. Because of that, about $150 billion is being brought in through this criminal industry. And it is the second largest criminal industry worldwide. So again, it sadly is a thriving criminal industry, and that is why we are seeing the numbers where they are. I won't spend too much time here on the national statistics. You can see how many cases were reported. The reason we have since 2007 is because that's when the National Human Trafficking Hotline was implemented. And that's when we were really starting to get a lot of those reports and numbers actually reported. But something I do want to note is that the average age of entry, this is average, this doesn't mean this is the case for all cases, but it's 11 to 13 years old for boys and 12 to 13-year-old for girls. Now, we have seen and worked with shelters that have had people in their 50s in their shelters. We're also aware of people that have had infants and newborns that have been trafficked as well. So again, this is our average to give us a ballpark of the age groups that are entering, but it impacts every age, and so it's so important for us to all be aware so that we can make a difference. I'm going to jump prevalent form of human trafficking reported in Pennsylvania, with the majority of cases involving women. Now, that does not mean it's not happening to men, because we have to keep in mind that we're going off of reported cases. This is a largely unreported crime, and as such, we know that there are limited statistics in some areas. Men are a big demographic that often don't report because they feel embarrassed or some shame, and so we don't always have the most accurate standing for how many men are maybe involved in human trafficking that could be. And so keep in mind, again, these are coming from the cases reported in to the hotline. I'm going to jump over this one here just for the sake of time. Very similarly, Pennsylvania, again, sex trafficking's most prevalent form as it is nationally, and again, more women than any other category reported in Pennsylvania as well as nationally. So, I jumped ahead. Usually I ask you why Pennsylvania is the perfect storm. I'm kind of giving it to you. But there are some other answers that are not listed on here that I'd be interested if you guys have any ideas. So, what makes us the perfect storm for human trafficking? There are a variety of things, but we have a very intricate interstate system. Believe it or not all states have as many interstates as we do here in Pennsylvania. We're very used to it and the crazy traffic that comes along with it, right? But we have to keep in mind that traffickers, and it is important to note too, human trafficking is not human smuggling. So people do not have to travel or cross county lines or travel out of state to be trafficked. But there are some traffickers that do travel with their victims and look for a large population to distribute to. And so because of that, for those that are considering the travel aspect of things, somewhere like Pennsylvania would be ideal, because you can reach 70% of North America within a day's drive of our state, and we have a variety of roadway systems in our region. We're also very close to a lot of major cities. Why does this matter? If you're looking to victimize a larger population, kind of fly under the radar, or again, serve a larger client base, places like major cities really do stand out. But again, that doesn't mean it's not happening here. In fact, recent research is showing that since the pandemic, a large majority of people that are being trafficked by romantic partners as well as family members. Up to 42% in the 2020 report, 42% were trafficked by a family member, and then 39% were trafficked by a romantic partner. So that's showing us that people know their trafficker more times than not. We might think of the movie Taken and this elaborate abduction scene, or somebody being stalked in a mall, or zip ties put onto your windshield to mark you for being trafficked. It doesn't mean it can't be done, but most likely it's not how they're doing it, because traffickers, again, they want to make money, they don't want to be reported, and they want to fly under the radar. And so with that, something like abduction, especially here in the United States, it's going to be reported almost immediately. Police are going to be on it, family members are going to be on it. But instead, if a romantic partner is, harming somebody and has maybe made themselves the center of that person's world, and has isolated a person from their other loved ones, from family members or trusted individuals, and they become the center of that person's world, it's not as strange for them to be seen together, or for them to go away for extended periods of time together as it would be, again, if a abduction occurred. So it doesn't mean it can't happen in those instances, but it's not as common as maybe we might see in movies and Hollywood scenarios. So just something to keep in mind. Also, our first top grossing criminal industry throughout our nation is drug trafficking. The second is human trafficking. Naturally, these two often go hand in hand. We're seeing issues with the drug epidemic and a lot of usage, especially in our state with opioids. You're going to see human trafficking right alongside it. Many times substances are used to lure victims as well as used to control and keep a leash on people. And so that's just something to consider, as well as if the area is really struggling with a drug epidemic. Chances are trafficking is in its midst. All right, so COVID-19, how has that impacted human trafficking? With COVID-19, we know that a lot of life moved online. For a great deal of time, people were isolated. Typical reporting channels were down. And so because of this, what we saw was susceptibility to human trafficking increased. As we dealt with rising costs, especially in housing and food and other necessities, we've seen an overall rise in costs. It may have been that piece that really pushed people over the edge into that vulnerability of struggling to make ends meet. And so as a result, that made them far more susceptible to human trafficking, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. I'll unpack that some more for you. We saw online trafficking increase. Makes sense, as a lot of life moved online. But then we also saw the sexual exploitation of minors increase in almost every single country around the world. And we were not immune to that. We also saw a drop in cases reported as well as victims reported. Almost 200 cases, almost a 200 case decrease and victim decrease from 2020 to 2021. And as you look at statistics from 2018 to 2019, we're really behind on the number of reports that took place, which makes us wonder, could it have been because of the isolation? We're dealing with a whole host of other problems, so things like trafficking are not being recognized. All right, I threw a lot at you. So where we are going in this journey, this is kind of you are getting everything right now, and then we're going to start unpacking some of what I shared. So where we're going next is we're going to talk about recruitment and the grooming process, how people enter into the industry of human trafficking. We're going to then discuss signs of human trafficking, how to report it, and then from there we'll discuss solutions and things like that. But any questions on the statistics side of things? Any questions on Pennsylvania, our local area, or anything like that? You guys aren't too scared yet, are you?
Is there a specific county or city in Pennsylvania that has the highest percentage of human trafficking?
So it depends. Actually, it's really interesting you said that. We just published a blog post on Monday dissecting a study exactly on this as far as the number of cases of human trafficking getting reported per county. So naturally, the counties that are showing to have the most cases are typically the ones that have human trafficking task forces, are the ones that have various protocols in place for reporting and prosecution and everything else. And then we're like, you're the worst in the state, but it's like, wait, but they have solutions in place, and that is why they're getting pegged as some of the worst. And so what you would see on those reports would be things like Montgomery County, Lancaster County, and Dauphin as the top three. But again, keeping in mind that all of those counties have proactive steps that they're taking to find individuals that are being trafficked, to go through the prosecution element. So we actually kind of challenge that and say, if a county has 0 cases reported, something's amiss because they're not recognizing it. We know trafficking is in all 67 counties in Pennsylvania. So if a county's not reporting any, my question is, why not? And it's not uncommon for us too to face, different situations where people just deny that it's happening. And the reality is, it is happening. We just have to dig a little bit deeper. So it's prevalent. York is definitely one where we do see a lot of cases, and naturally too, there are certain attractions for a trafficker in certain areas as well. And so there will naturally be some that have a higher demographic of it compared to others, but it is in every county. So that was a long response to it, but I want to give a little background to it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming most of us are interested in hearing this because it is difficult. But local numbers. I mean, we've got Pennsylvania. We're a big state. Mm-hmm. How about locally? Redlight. How are we affected?
Yeah. So actually, we were just meeting a few weeks ago at a round table with some of York County's officials from a couple of the state representatives, our chief of police that represent a variety of townships in our region, and then local service providers. And I don't have a statistic like just right out there as far as how many cases they have. Now, in the report that we did put out there on Monday, there is a link. Yes, there is a link. I was trying to remember if we had it. That will tell you, okay, here are how many cases were prosecuted and victims that were found in each of those counties. So we do have that available on our website. But in this region, it is predominant, and Red Lion is not exempt from that. And so as we were talking to some of your leaders in this region and really working through solutions, some of what we're seeing is, and trafficking looks different in every county and every town. Various sections of York, we're seeing a lot of gang-related trafficking taking place. We're also dealing with a lot of issues with trafficking online. That's not exempt from really any county as life has moved online. We're seeing many youth. And youth, we're gonna talk about this. We're gonna talk about online safety. But we're seeing a lot of youth being trafficked online and exploited online through social media and other outlets. But then we're also seeing a rise, especially with the illicit massage businesses, and dealing with those and individuals that are working in those businesses that you might see they're open 24/7. And I'm sorry, nobody needs a massage at 3 a.m. There's some red flags there. But here we're seeing it: truck stops, massage businesses, hotels. We are seeing gang-related trafficking, but for our minors especially, we're seeing it happening in schools, at home, and online in a lot of instances. But I will say, as far as York County's Human Trafficking Task Force and local police and authorities, they're very well aware of it and working towards solutions. So it's not, hey, we know this is happening and nothing's going on. It takes time, and really, it's a grassroots level effort as well. It takes all of us in the community to be aware and get involved and support those efforts as well. We can talk about what that looks like later.
You mentioned solutions being taking place in different counties and cities, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. What are some examples of these solutions? How do they track it? How do they start with one point and follow that thread all the way through? What are some of these solutions you mentioned?
Yeah, so as far as the solutions are how they're tracking number of cases, which...
I think both.
Both? Okay, so
sure.
Yeah, as far as the tracking of the cases and all of that, we get that from the Pennsylvania courts report that they put out. So that's where we're seeing a lot of that. Now, as far as cases, it varies based off how they're tracking it, right? So it depends if there is an element of transportation that's going on with trafficking, which we know it's not human smuggling. It doesn't mean that somebody actually has to go from destination A to destination B to be trafficked. And in many ways, and this is where Greenlight's been working a lot with our local schools. We've been in several of York County schools as well, working to equip teachers and faculty members, because a lot of times they're some of the first to recognize it in the school systems, but parents as well, to recognize if it's happening online and things like that. So solutions we'll dive into a little bit later, and we'll definitely piece that out a little bit more for you. All right, I'm gonna jump into the recruitment side because I think it might help us with some of the questions that are coming through. There are risk factors that make somebody more susceptible to being trafficked. Now, human trafficking can impact any socioeconomic status, any background, ethnicity, religious background, right? But there are certain risk factors that make somebody more vulnerable to being preyed upon by a trafficker. Now, if somebody's experienced this, that does not mean that you're necessarily going to be trafficked. So please don't freak out if you're seeing it, but it is important to be aware of these vulnerabilities so that we can then deal with them so that we're not having a big target essentially on our back, right? So things like substance use concern, whether somebody has had a past struggle with substance abuse or is currently struggling with that, that is a big risk factor. Runaway and homeless youth. 1 in 6 runaways reported by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children will be approached by a trafficker within 48 hours of running away from home. That's 1 in 6. And a lot of those are typically within the foster care system as well. And so those are some things to consider. If there's unstable housing, we've seen this a lot since COVID. There's been a huge uptick in couch surfing and unstable housing because of the rising cost of living. And what this might look like is somebody saying, essentially posing as a benefactor or somebody who's a good-natured person, saying, you can come stay with me. I will put a roof over your head. You can stay warm. You and your kiddos maybe can hang out on the couch, and you're welcome to eat whatever's in the fridge. I'm really sorry you guys are dealing with this. This is, COVID's hit all of us. Please just come and stay with me. But then maybe a few weeks later, that story changes a little bit. And it's, you guys have been here for 3 weeks now. You're really messing up my place. It's getting annoying. You haven't moved out yet. You've got to pay me back. It's about $700 a month for rent. I want to see that money in maybe 3 days or whatever time frame they give, and they're expected to pay that back. Now, if somebody has not been able to pay for rent or their mortgage or somewhere to live, and then suddenly out of nowhere they're expected to pay a set amount of money, it's going to be really difficult to pull together. So then what typically comes right after that is, if you can't give me the cash, you can send me photos, you have to let me video you, or those that I decide on are gonna come and they're gonna sleep with you and you can't say anything about it because that's what you owe me. And it ends up becoming this debt that can never be repaid. Now that's just one instance of what it could look like. But that's how unstable housing could play into something like trafficking. Mental health concerns that are going unaddressed, that certainly makes somebody susceptible. Maybe recent relocation or migration. It is important to recognize that, though, that in the United States, the majority of people that are being trafficked are US citizens. Yes, we are dealing with trafficking with foreign nationals and those that immigrate and relocate, but majority, again, are US citizens that are being trafficked. And I know we often focus on, we just, every time we get questions on that, so that's why I say that there. And then the other thing, if somebody's experienced any sexual abuse or harassment or violence of some sort, and it's never been dealt with, and they've not walked through a healing process, that does make somebody susceptible to falling for maybe the ploys of a trafficker. I have yet to meet a survivor of sex trafficking that does not have this kind of abuse in their background. Now, that does not mean that's what somebody is destined for. That does not mean that healing cannot occur and they can stop that from continuing into their future life. But if left undealt with, it can be a problem that can haunt somebody and potentially make them susceptible to trafficking. So, what does it look like? How does somebody get groomed? How do they get from having a susceptibility and a vulnerability to actually being trafficked? And I like to give this scenario when we talk in schools of a crime show. And when you've got a crime that has occurred, you've got this mystery that you're working to solve, right? And your detectives are trying to figure out, how did this person get here? And they're doing their background research on, what was it that caused this person to end up having the crime occur to them that did. And so they're investigating it. What we often look at with human trafficking that's important to recognize is that grooming process. How did that person get to where they are? So then too, later in the healing process, we can identify, what do we need to work through that was a root cause at the beginning that caused them to get trafficked or susceptible to being trafficked, and how can we deal with that root issue? So what we often see in this pattern is a trafficker will target their victim. So those vulnerabilities that we just talked about, they're often looking for that kind of vulnerability. Traffickers are master manipulators. So they're looking at, how can I exploit somebody? How can I make myself rich off of another person? Again, very few of them have any regard for human life, and they want to make money. And so they're going to target that victim. Then what they do is they work to gain trust. This is why it can be difficult to recognize somebody who's been trafficked. That trust is gained. That trust could be a friendship. That trust could be, again, if it's a relative that's trafficking a person. One of my first instances I worked on with trafficking involved a woman in her later 20s. And her story of trafficking started when she was just 8 years old. It was her mom who was selling her. Mom had a drug addiction and wanted to get the next fix, and then was, struggling with money. So she got creative. She said, I've got an 8-year-old daughter. And so what did she do? She sold her 8-year-old daughter. But the sad reality, too, was that there were people that were buying her. And so there would be strange men that would come into the home, and there was a menu of items that they could choose from, and they would have their way with this 8-year-old. But that is not an uncommon story that we hear either. Whether it's a family member, or a romantic partner, or somebody that was considered a friend that's done this. So that trust gets gained, whether it's through meeting emotional needs, meeting physical needs, or whatever that might be. Then what takes place is isolation after those needs are met. If you guys are familiar, how many of you guys have learned in school already Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Has anybody taken a psychology class yet? In school, you guys have talked through that fun triangle? Yeah. here's how you could turn it into those detective skills or in a situation of trafficking. We all have a hierarchy of needs. And so with that, a trafficker is looking at what needs are not being met for this person and how can I enter in, essentially, and provide that for them for my own personal gain. And so that could be relational and emotional needs getting met, like we've talked about. Those physical needs could be, a variety of things. So we've got to consider that. So they meet that need, they isolate, they make that person dependent upon them. They tell them lies and they say, your family, they're out to get you. I've been here for you this whole time and I've seen the fights that you guys have had. I'm the only one who understands you. Or it might be, if you go back to them, you know what it's like. You're hungry when you're there. It's cold when you're at home. You have a warm place with me. And then they're asking things from you that make you feel really uncomfortable at first, but they justify it and they say, it's okay, this is our little secret. It's all right. Sometimes we just have to go through this. It's not going to last forever, but you're helping me keep the lights on for us. You're making a difference. So that isolation happens, the exploitation takes place, and then that maintaining of control. They keep that control in that person. And so this is typically what that grooming process looks like. So there's a lot of manipulation. There's a great deal of those strings that are getting pulled that make somebody dependent on them. So when we consider the fact of, well, why didn't they just run? Why aren't they running away? Well, they're very emotionally connected to that person. And if you've ever heard of something called Stockholm Syndrome, where that person just really doesn't recognize that their abuser is an abuser. They look at them as, that person that they love and adore, and it's hard for them to get away from them. This very much does play out in these trafficking instances. So this doesn't mean this is exactly step-by-step how it happens, but more often than not, these are the phases that we see. It's important to be aware of. Just for the sake of time, we're going to jump through this really quick. We did talk about some of that already. I want to get into the signs of trafficking here. We do have these listed on our website. I'm going to go through it fairly quickly so we have time for questions. But signs of human trafficking include what you're seeing here. It does not mean that every single one of these has to be present for a case to be considered human trafficking. Sometimes it's just one of these. Sometimes these are also signs of sexual abuse and assault, other signs of, domestic violence and whatnot. So it's very important to still be aware of these. But a lot of these are often prevalent in a case of trafficking. So we want to make sure you guys know them. So if someone is living with their employer or transportation is being provided by their employer, that could be a red flag, unless it's like a family-owned business and everyone lives together. Maybe that's not as weird, but it might be strange if the person is living with their boss and their boss requires that they're being taken to and from work by them. If we notice signs like the person doesn't really speak a whole lot on their own, and when they're out in public, they always have almost like an escort with them, and they look at that person like, is it okay for me to say this? And they're looking for that approval. That can be a sign that somebody is being controlled by another individual. You want to take note of that. Or if their answers appear really scripted and rehearsed, like you ask them how they're doing, and it's beyond just like that shy, element, and for the teenagers in here that I don't want to talk to you right now. It's beyond that. It might just be they almost have a sense of fear that you're picking up on in those answers. If they don't have access to any of their identity documents, that can be utilized to maintain control. It's something to be aware of. If there's a group of people that have identical markings and tattoos, you want to take note of that. Beyond just, hey, we're best friends, we've got, matching tattoo. This might be people that are coming from a variety of backgrounds and don't really have a whole lot in common, but yet they all have a similar burn mark, scar, or tattoo in the same place. This is one that we've talked about with medical professionals on keeping an eye on, because this could be a sign that a trafficker has branded this person and they belong to that group that's being exploited. We're going to go through a few of those. We talked about if you're under the age of 18, engaged in commercial sex, that is trafficking. If the person is really disengaged from regular life and activities or withdrawn, that could be a sign that something else is going on. It could also be a sign of trafficking, so something to keep in mind. And then if they're never allowed to leave a place or always have an escort, those unreasonable security measures, take note of that as well. we might think, and actually you'll notice throughout our presentation and on our website, we do not have any depictions of handcuffs or bondage or anything like that, because many times traffic victims are held hostage by what we call the invisible chains. It's those manipulative tactics. It is the control there. And so because of that, if we're looking for the person that is bound, if we're looking for the sheet hanging out the window that says help, or somebody that is chained away in a basement, we are going to miss the people that are being trafficked. And this is where the education on the topic is so vital, because we end up completely overlooking the person that's checking us out at Giant and is a victim of human trafficking. We have no idea, because we're missing so many of the other signs, because we're looking for that Hollywood scene that says it's trafficking. And so if we are aware of people and the stories, and a lot of times in our culture, it's a mind your own business, keep your eyes low, don't engage, like, I don't want to get involved in anybody else's business. But if we're seeing these red flags and we're doing nothing about it, that is not going to change the number of cases that we're dealing with. It's not going to change help and getting help for those that are being trafficked. In fact, as we have connected with survivors and worked with the victim advocates and law enforcement that are processing these cases, one of the common things we often hear is, nobody ever saw me or said anything about it. I was out in public, I was shopping, I have the ability to grocery shop, I have the ability to go to church, but nobody saw me. Or, we often hear, on the other side of, they saw me, they saw my bruise marks, they saw me crying, they saw that I was getting yelled at by my trafficker, and nobody ever called it in or said anything. They just thought I was trashed. They thought what's coming to her is, she gets what she gets. She had it coming to her. And we ignore it. And we kind of desensitize ourselves and tell ourselves, it's okay. This is, they've got to deal with it themselves. And we move on. So, if we're recognizing any of those signs that we just talked about, it is important to report it. Even if you're not 100% sure if it's human trafficking, but something feels off, call it in. The least you can do is offer somebody a lifeline, and maybe they don't actually need it. Well, then good, they don't need it. But if they do need it, and that lifeline is not extended to them and nobody has called it in, they're going to be stuck in that situation. We don't want to see that for them. So immediate danger, call 911. If you're a mandated reporter, you do need to call Childline if a minor is involved, which we have listed up on the screen. But then, and this might seem like a lot, we highly recommend calling the National Human Trafficking Hotline. The reason being is, it allows them to send an extraction team if it's needed. We know some towns and cities are not fully equipped to deal with a full extraction of victims of trafficking, especially if multiple people are involved. And some cities and towns are a little bit limited in resources. And so because of that, it adds a layer of accountability in the process, but it also provides more resources to the situation. But then also, if you're with a victim, we very much believe in empowering survivors. And I have done this with survivors if they're not in a situation where the trafficker is present or they're not in an unsafe location. I will ask them, hey, do you want to call this in with me? And we walk through that process together, so they're making that choice to do that. But then they can ask the person on the other side of this questions about resources that are available and things like that, where I can offer it, but it's a second opinion in a way for them to get more resources. So, I have it on speed dial. If I ever suspect that I'm calling it in right away. We've also had people that are maybe in a situation where they can't call, but they can text. And this is one, and actually on the back table there, we have some cards with the hotline on it. If you're suspecting it, or maybe suspect somebody is being trafficked, you can give them that number, and they can always reach out to them as well. It's open 24/7, and there are over 200 languages spoken. So it's a phenomenal, phenomenal resource we highly recommend utilizing. All right, so we'll jump into questions, and then I want to make sure we have some time for online safety and security. Any questions so far in the recruitment, grooming process, signs of trafficking, anything like that? Yeah? What are they doing for children being trafficked in the foster homes? So Greenlight did a seminar for one of the parent conferences that takes place on an annual basis for foster parents. It is becoming a more discussed topic for individuals that are looking to become foster parents. We know those regulations, though, do vary from county to county. And so this would be an area that we recommend in a solution setting of if there are individuals in this room involved in, being foster parents and foster homes, I would ask your local representatives as well as those that you're working within of, hey, what are we doing to essentially better screen for this and prevent this from happening? Because we are seeing a lot of links with trafficking in the foster care system, and so we're seeing it from needing to educate from our standpoint, but also those within to speak up and help rally around solutions as well. So as of right now, there's been a little bit more of a movement toward educating the parents, but there's still a lot more work that needs to be done. So there's definitely opportunity there for people to get involved. Questions? All right, we're gonna jump into online safety then real quick. So, young folks and adults, because you know what? We know of a lot of adults too that have been part of these conversations. But we've got some tips for overall online safety. But the reason we stress this, we've had the opportunity to work with law enforcement, but also other nonprofits that actually specialize in finding predators and traffickers online. And it never ceases to amaze us how quickly a conversation can transpire between a young person and a trafficker. And we have seen it and timed it out where it was a matter of 8 minutes from the point of a trafficker saying, hello, how are you, to then nude photos getting exchanged. 8 minutes. And we're also noticing, and had a chance to talk with some Shared Hope International representatives. They work a great deal on the trafficking front, and especially with minors, and provide really great resources for educating parents and minors on trafficking online. And they're seeing a very strong correlation as well between these predators online and an increase in suicide rates as well. Some as quick as 3 hours. And so guys, we can't stress this enough of utilizing the resources that we have online well. And I know we wanna, it's fun to get a lot of followers, it's fun to get a lot of likes. It gives us a little boost, right? But at the same time, we have to keep in mind that what we're putting out there, and if we're just allowing anybody to follow us, you have to consider the fact, what if you've accepted a friend request from someone who's posing as a trafficker and you don't know them? But you're putting all of that personal information out there about yourself. And they're using that against you, whether you realize it or not. So we have a little bit of an activity that we recommend that we'll have you guys do kind of on your own. But if you want to freak your friends out a little bit, we recommend go on their social media pages. Give yourself 5 minutes, put 5 minutes on the clock. Go to their social media page, and I want you to write down everything that you can find out about them on social media. That includes, your Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, whatever platform you choose. Go on there, and I want you to see, can you figure out where do they like to shop? When do they come home? Where have they vacationed? Are mom and dad home often? Or are they home alone a lot? Favorite foods, favorite sport, what makes them excited, what makes them sad? All of these things, write it all out. And then, again, do this with a close friend. Freak them out a little, and you might already know this because you're a close friend, but play that detective and say, this is everything that I found on you on social media. Now I want you to consider, again, a stranger or a trafficker, finding out all of that information as well. They have full access to it if you've allowed them onto your social media platforms. So then when we have people sliding into our DMs and they're asking how baseball practice went, or they're offering us a modeling career, or they're willing to sign us on for a basketball gig or whatever it might be, and we're wondering, they seem to know us really well. They must have really been following me through my athletics at school. They've really been paying attention to what I've been doing. No, they've been creeping on you on social media more often than not, especially if they're saying, hey, surprise your parents, don't tell your parents, we're gonna keep this a secret. Because if you're able to bring home several $1,000s or sign this contract, you're gonna make a lot of money. But you can't tell them, we want it to be a surprise. It's a pretty big red flag. Why wouldn't you want to tell the parents or adults? So just consider that, especially too if they're asking for pictures or pushing and asking questions that are making you feel uncomfortable. It is okay to say no. And I know some of the students had to step out, but who in this room has received a DM from somebody they don't know, a complete stranger? And you're not in trouble. I mean, I've received them. I get a lot of those as well. Yeah, okay. You're like, you're not a little bit shy. You're not in trouble. We've all received those weird messages. More often than not, students will tell us that they reply to those. And the reason oftentimes is, oh, I don't want to be mean. Or, I was kind of bored. I thought I'd talk to them. But then that person keeps pestering and hounding, and then there's an exchange of information that happens. So don't do that. Ways to protect yourself. First of all, be aware of who is on your social media platforms. I know for my husband and I, we've gone through our accounts, and if we don't know the person or haven't seen them in a long time, we don't let them follow us because they don't need to see our stuff. We've got our own accounts for our organizations that they can follow there, but they don't need to see our personal stuff. So go through your friend list. Who is on your friend list? Are they people that you know? If they're not, it is okay to unfriend them. And look to see too. If an ad seems too good to be true, this person keeps reaching out, chances are it is. Talk to a trusted adult about it. If you're not sure and you're like, hey, this seems like a really great opportunity, and I like to be told I'm pretty. I like to be told I'm good at sports. I like to, be told that I'm really social and communicate well. We don't like that. But if they're asking you to meet up, if they're asking for photos and personal information, don't engage with it. Just don't. It's not worth it. We hear a lot, too, of young people that are preyed upon by older folks, where you're like, well, they look like they're 16 years old. What's the big deal? Well, that person could have also copied somebody else's account or cloned it, and it's actually an older person that is not a 16-year-old. So be aware of some of those schemes. Block and report if you feel unsafe. Protect your security information and all of that. Some common sense things, but we do recommend, if you're not sure what to do, and parents in the room, if technology is still kind of foreign in all these crazy new apps, Shared Hope International has some really, really great resources on their website as well. Tutorials to go through on how to protect youth online, parental controls and things like that, conversations to have. We highly recommend it. So that's Shared Hope International. Take a peek. They've got some really good resources for parents and adults that work with youth. So the big question, how can we get involved with something like human trafficking? A lot of times it can feel like it is, we're really climbing a mountain, right? But you know what? As we keep chipping away at it, we all play our part, a difference can be made. And the reality that we have seen with Greenlight is Greenlight Operation, we can only do so much in the areas that we work in. We specialize in education and we're working on the restorative component, but each of you has a sphere of influence that we don't have. With your friends, with your family, with your colleagues, at school, with your peers and your teachers, you all have influence, whether you realize it or not. And so we often ask people, are you willing to use your voice and that influence to make a difference for freedom? It might mean some uncomfortable conversations. It might mean some hard boundaries that need to get set. But it all makes a difference in what we do and how you can get involved. So what we highly recommend is some starting points. You might be like, this crazy lady threw a lot at us tonight. I'm a little freaked out. I don't want to ever go online again. Use it wisely, but it's okay if you don't go online. Anyway, no, in all seriousness, we want to set you up with some next steps. So each of us have different skill sets. We all have different backgrounds and ways to get involved and where we would have impact. So all of us, though, we can be informed consumers. We know that human trafficking, we talked a lot on sex trafficking tonight because it's the most prevalent form in our region, but there is labor trafficking, there's domestic servitude, there's child soldiering, there are a variety of categories of human trafficking. We need to be aware of what we're consuming, from our clothing, to our food, to pornography. One of the top outlets where people are trafficked is through pornography. And if that is something we regularly consume, you are buying into that business. I hate to tell you, but you are. And we often like to think that's something that doesn't really have an impact, but it does. So what are you consuming? From your clothes to your entertainment to your food. Reach out to a local legislator. Trust me when I say they do actually listen if we're reaching out, and especially if we're offering a practical solution. It's one thing just to say, rah, 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 I'm against this. It's another thing to say, I want to support you in advancing freedom. I want to support you in stopping human trafficking, and here's how we can do it. And if they're hearing a lot about this issue, and they're hearing that they have an engaged community on combating it, we have seen them take strides to make a difference. So don't discredit it. I know there can be a lot of frustration in that arena, but don't discredit it. Continue learning. There's a lot to learn. You guys know more than most people do. Most people know about human trafficking now, but there's still more to learn. I'm still learning a lot about it. Our team is still learning about it. We are always students of the craft. So read up on literature that survivors have put out there, check out other organizations combating human trafficking, and keep learning about this issue so that your solutions and your approaches can be informed. And so that you're not just spinning your wheels thinking you're making a difference on something, but in reality it's maybe not the most impactful as it could be. And that's not to discourage you, it's just maybe a reality check. Keep learning. Be humble in the process. We all make mistakes in it. I know for Greenlight Operation, we are a nonprofit, and so support other organizations that are working against human trafficking. It takes a lot of money to help in the restoration process with survivors. Consider supporting an organization that works to combat human trafficking. Talk to your local school boards. I know schools can be leery on how to stop human trafficking. It's a little bit intense. Do we want to bring it forward? And I know from our standpoint in the schools we worked with, we have never had a complaint about bringing a topic in education on human trafficking. Students have been equipped, parents have been overwhelmingly thankful, and so if your school's a little bit hesitant on it, push it forward and take it to your school board meeting. For those in the room, you guys get this. Be a mentor to the youth, especially those that are displaying some of these vulnerabilities. Show them love, help them build that foundation so they don't so they're not susceptible to the ploys of a trafficker. Keep implementing the knowledge that you know and get involved with other groups, whether that's through volunteering, attending their events, or things like that. Talk a good bit about Greenlight Operation Solutions. I won't spend too much time there. But we do have internship opportunities for seniors in the room. For college-age students, we do have internships, plenty of volunteer opportunities, and we do have upcoming events as well. We actually have one coming up in May, and our registration just went live this week. If you're interested in meeting more of the Greenlight team, learning about ways to get involved, we have a 5K happening on May 20th. It is a great way to get plugged in locally, to meet others that are really on the front lines. And we have people from all over Pennsylvania that participate in this, so we would love to have you join us. Meet the team and make a difference. And you can create your own team as well. So we could have a little bit of Redline represented. We'd love to have you there. So that is on May 20th, 9 a.m. And information is on our website. And then this is how you can contact Greenlight Operation. We publish info regularly on social media as well as our blog. We want to keep people informed on trends of human trafficking, what's happening locally, how to get involved. And so feel free to check out our resources. Give us a follow on social media. We are on Instagram and Facebook, and we'd love to connect with you there. And then I'll be around a little bit tonight to answer any questions, but if there are any you'd like to ask that would benefit the group, we can go ahead and dive into some of those. How are you guys feeling? You're like, whoa. Yeah.
I have a question, I don't even know how to exactly form it. I've heard a few people mention about different store locations, like Walmart, that they've been followed around by someone who's approached them. I had that happen to me at Walmart.
Yeah.
How do you tell the difference between maybe another adult who literally just doesn't know that they're being inappropriate versus a trafficker?
Yeah, sometimes you don't know the difference. You don't want it to get far enough, in a sense, to know the difference. So I would say if that is happening, report it right away. I will say again, to the trafficking point, more often than not, traffickers are going to use manipulative tactics that fly under the radar because they want to make money, and that's their goal. But that doesn't mean that predators and stalkers and abductors are not out there. They are still present. Even though we know about human trafficking now, those people are still there. So I would say don't let it get that far, call it in. And safety plan, in public settings. I know my husband and I had a really wild situation over the summer that took place that has caused us, when we're in public, to evaluate when we're in a room or we're out in public, what is our exit strategy? What are the emergency protocols for X, Y, and Z? And it's not stuff you have to write down before you go on the wall. Just think through it, be aware of your surroundings. So Yeah. Any other questions? Students, do you have any questions? How are you guys feeling? Right.
Quiet.
Feeling quiet? Just taking it all in?
Sure.
There you go.
They're also.
Any other questions?
It's a live broadcast. Everyone should come in.
There we go. Awesome. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I will be around. We do have some resources in the back, as well as a QR code. If you're interested in signing up for a newsletter, please feel free to do that through the QR code there. And then, yeah, if you've got other questions, I'll be around. Thank you, guys.